Hey, this is Walt, and today we're talking about all things horror on our genre edition for the BAMF podcast. Going from left to right, we have a star studded panel to talk about all the creepy, scary, and gory that we can muster today. We have Andrew Colas from Canada. How are you, sir?
Um, Scary stuff, kids. Ooh, I'm good.
Next, we have the author of the soon to be published horror film Tortured Trees. We have Mr. Brian D'Ambrosco.
Yo,
And then rounding out our panel, we have Mr. Dom Sumner from the middle of the country, sporting an excellent police officer face. How are you today, sir?
To get many bitter, I might send my check back.
I think that's going to be the running joke for this series. So today we're talking about all the gory and horror and all of the things that go bump in the night that make us love and attract us to horror movies, films, comics. First of all, I got to say, I've listened to 4 podcasts over the last week about horror films, and it always sounds like they're saying whore instead of horror. Which has been weirding me out like crazy, but you know,
Love me a good horror film. That's great. Let's watch a few horror films.
So starting with you, Andrew, for you, what makes a really great horror film, and what's your preferred genre of horror?
Well, good question. Let me put it differently. Let me say what my favorite horror film of all time is, and then that'll sort of really set the stage for what I think is a good horror film. My favorite horror film of all time is a film made in 1980, shot in Canada, by the way, starring George C. Scott, called The Changeling by a Czech, I believe he's a Czech director named Peter Medovic. And I had the pleasure of working with him on an episode of Masters of Horror and was really, really excited to work with someone that had made a film that I idolize. And what makes this film scary is that there's no gore. It's not a gory film. It's not a jumpy scare film. It's a real psychological events happen and things happen that just get inside your head, and it just makes the hair on your arms go up. And it's a great, great film. The Changeling, 1980, recommended highly. I'm not into splatterpunk. I'm not into torture porn. I'm not into any of that stuff that seems to be the modern horror. I thought Paranormal Activity was until they re-edited it for cinematic release and changed the ending and all that stuff, and everything after was garbage. Yeah, correct. Sorry, there's one bit I think in the third Paranormal Activity that made me jump, and that was about it. It was really a well done moment. But really, for me, a horror film has to have a level of psychological. It has to get inside my head, and it can't just be gross and disgusting. Because I'm not scared of guts.
And Brian,
Ta-da.
what are we talking when it comes to horror? What's the
okay,
preferred genre?
I'm gonna have to go with B-rate, and I'm gonna completely disagree with Andrew. I want blood, I want guts, I want somebody getting their head sawed off and like stuff exploding. You need all of that in there to make it a horror movie. Otherwise, it's a couple girls talking about their feelings, as far as I'm concerned. Really do need all that in the movie to sell it as a horror film, at least in my opinion. Like Saw. I think Saw would be like one of the most defining horror movies of all time. The first one or any of the following, but the first one really hits it home.
And what about Saw? Was it that made you feel like that was the defining part of the genre?
So I do like the suspense aspect to it, but there's always, the next thing. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not really sure how it's going to turn out, or, you kind of empathize with the characters that are chained both to the bathroom, the stall, and they're left to decisions that are, less than agreeable, but they've got to make it through. You know what I mean?
And Andrew, on rebuttal, you were saying that for you, you don't necessarily need the gore. Is it more about the suspense for you, or is it the sense of the unknown that makes it scary?
Well, let's. I want to rebut 2 points of Brian's, if you don't mind. One, you got a couple of girls talking about their feelings. I don't know what the fuck scary films you watch, bro, but just take the one I mentioned, The Changeling. There's, I think, one entire conversation between two female characters in it. It's mostly all about a man coming to terms with the loss of his family and a ghost that's trying to get a message through to him. I'm telling you, watch the film and then come back to me. You don't need the gore. Secondly, you pick Saw, the first Saw, principally, which is a perfect 100% case study from my point, which is what made Saw good was the psychological game, the not knowing what was going on, and then that reveal at the ending that had nothing to do with the gore. All of the best parts of Saw had nothing to do with the guts or the practical effects. It had all to do with, and you admitted it, how it got inside your head and how it started working on your brain, making you think while you're watching the film. That, to me, is perfect horror. Guts and gore, I'll give you the perfect example of a failure. Eli Roth's Cabin Fever. That movie was not scary. That movie was not terrifying. It was just gross. And he tried to even play it for laughs doing, what's his name, Saul. Oh, God, the guy from House of a Thousand Corpses. Oh, the evil clown guy. Anyway, the horror genre, when it's just all gore and guts and torture porn and all that, that's shock. That's not scary. That's just shocking. That's just, ooh. So for me, you kind of made my point by referring to the first Saw movie. So I'm going to just step back and go, job well done, smoke cigarettes, and watch you guys talk for the next 20 minutes.
How did you come to the horror genre, Dominic? What's the for you? What defines a real good horror film?
For me, like I said, it's got to be a combination of different elements. Like I said, it's got to be something that's one, it's going to entertain me. Two, it's got to scare me. If I'm sitting here watching a film and I'm like, whatever, I just can't get into the movie. I don't mind a little gore. I don't mind slasher flicks as long as it's a good slasher flick. Like, say, for an example, when Halloween came out, and I remember seeing it many, many, many years ago. Halloween was a slasher movie, but like I said, it still kept me entertained. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And you're talking about Saw. Saw was a good movie. I liked Saw. And like I said, but also it's at points that Andrew's made, we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And like I said, the big reveal at the end, everybody was like, man, did you see that? You're not going to believe what happened at the end of the movie. Something like that is what entertains me. But also I like movies like, say, The Exorcist. The Exorcist was a good movie in my opinion. I remember the director cut came out. I couldn't wait for that sucker to come out. I had it pre-order because I wanted that bad. I was like, man, I remember seeing this, and it scared the hell out of me when I watched it the first time. Or I couldn't sleep for a couple of nights after I watched it. Things like that.
Nice. I know that when I'm looking at a horror film, for me the element that defines a horror film for me is something that blatantly expresses how fragile we are as a species. Like I know Andrew and I shared a conversation because we were lined up with schedules, and we had a late night conversation one night, and we were talking about excellent films to get on Blu-ray. And he explicitly went out of his way to say you must get the Blu-ray edition of Jaws. And I remember Jaws as a film back then really showcased the frailty of, like, you got all these people running around and just going about their lives, but the second they hit the water, you're nothing but prey. And I
Can I jump in?
Yes.
And that's the perfect example right there. People seem to forget, because Jaws has become such a touchstone of great filmmaking, of a great filmmaker's career and how it started and blah, 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 blah. People forget that movie was a horror film when it came out. It was marketed on being afraid. It was marketed on scaring the living shit out of you. And it still holds up all these years later because of the characters, because of the story, because of the acting, and because of those what the fuck moments like Roy Scheider pitching Chum over behind his thing and then just fucking shark, and you just, that is an effective use of a jump scare. It's not a cat jumping out of a closet or a fucking book falling off a shelf. It's an effective storytelling moment that makes it really scary. So yeah, that was my next point I was going to make, was about Jaws. You got there. I'm happy to step back. Yay.
The thing about movies like that is it shows that even though we paint ourselves as masters of our domain, there are still elements of nature that, not necessarily a monster or a demon or what have you, just elements of regular everyday nature that can pimp slap the shit out of you and remind you that you're just human. Do you guys have any films like that blatantly point out something about existence in general that makes you step back and say, whoa, this is what it is for me?
That's a really good question. I'm just trying to think about movies that deal with the human condition only. No supernatural, no extraordinary elements, just the human condition. Jaws being one, even though some could say that shark was rather fucking supernatural because it wasn't, or preternatural, or whatever you want to call it, because it wasn't a normal shark. Wow, I'm going to have to think on that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to hit you up on that one. That's
Well,
tough.
what about Saw? You had said about how you enjoyed the first Saw movie. Even there, you had somebody coming to grips with his own death. You had people coming to grips with their own crimes. And like how they've betrayed people in their lives, and that's how they ended up in that box. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, actually, I wanted to change gears for a sec. So we can't mention horror movies without bringing up the original Evil Dead. And we can't. Um, I still want to go back to you need to have gore in a horror movie to actually make it a legitimate horror movie. I understand you do need the psychological, the mental thing where there's the suspense and you're building up the characters and everything, but you still need that element of gore. It should be shocking, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, but Ash's psychological breakdown in the first Evil Dead, in Evil Dead, I guess is the best way to put it, is far more palpable and really, 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 really darkening of a human condition than it is in, say, Evil Dead 2, where they're playing it for mostly, Three Stooges slapstick laughs and, or Army of Darkness or even the Evil Dead TV show. That first Evil Dead, though, they were making a legit horror film. They weren't trying to laugh at it. They were trying to do the best they could on a budget that they had. And even to the point when Cheryl gets sexually assaulted by the trees, in the first Evil Dead, it's really terrifying moment. You don't laugh. No one laughs in that moment. No one goes, ha ha ha, ha, look, trees are raping a girl. Whereas in the later films, when they do exaggerated moments like that, they're played more for the comedy, right? Which offsets the
Correct.
horror a lot. So for me, Evil Dead, number one, great film. But it's also like Living Dead. It itself is such a genre-defining movie that it sort of its levels of gore or its levels of, say, zombies or whatever the case may be, deadites, whatever you want to call things, is so the touchstone that everything else is going to come after and look at, that it's almost forgiven for what it does. Just like Saw is forgiven for its levels of gore because it's establishing a genre or a trope, torture porn, that later people are going to exploit and really, really, really take to the top and go over the top because they're trying to overdo that first thing that was done, right? So that's sort of how I see it, but it's a great film.
So what do you think about movies like Hostel and what was the other one?
Wrong Turn, Cabin in the Woods, not Cabin in the Woods, sorry, Cabin Fever. What other torture porn came out in the last few years, in the last 20 years? Those types of things, yeah. They're garbage films to me. They're
Last House on the Left.
Yeah, the original Last House on the Left. Now that is a hell of a film. The original Hills Have Eyes. That is a hell of a film. The original I Spit on Your Grave. Hell of a film. All the stuff that comes after, again,
all the remakes.
Yeah, they're trying to, and stuff that's based on that genre, or trying to, not genre, but that style. They're trying to monkey it or ape it or mimic it. They're a bag of chips. They're a piece of pizza, where the first is a meal. It's like it's something you never had before. It's a fresh new Cannibal Holocaust. Is that the film that people legitimately in the 70s thought they really were watching women get impaled on sticks the way they shot that film, to the point where people actually were trying to find out if the production crew had killed the actors while shooting in the jungle? That stuff's amazing stuff. Everything that comes afterwards is just sort of trying to say, look how cool we are. Walt, was it you who was telling me about this or someone else? The Three Eyes? Was it you who said that to me?
I don't think it was me.
Someone said this to me recently. There's three levels of creative sort of zeitgeist that happens, which is the innovators, the imitators, and the idiots. Okay, and the innovators are things like Saw, Evil Dead, Cannibal Holocaust, Night of the Living Dead, blah 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 blah, Jaws, and then there's the imitators, which are Dawn of the Dead is almost an imitation of the Night of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead imitates both of them at the same time, what have you. And then we get the stuff today like Sharknado, which is the idiots. They're just throwing garbage at a screen, and people are responding to it because sadly, we have the result of 30 years of shitty audience training where people don't know what a good film is anymore, hence why Mad Max Fury Road, which is a work of art, pardon me for getting off topic a little bit, loses in the box office to a sequel about a cappella singing. There you go. So for me, I'm always going to be the horror purist. I'm always going to go back to the original stuff, the first stuff, People Under the Stairs, things like that, stuff that's just was so innovative or so new and refreshing that the later stuff just seems like a pale comparison. And a perfect example of that would be, what's his name? I just mentioned one of his films, Dragula, Rob Zombie. House of a Thousand Corpses is absurd. It's an absolute exercise in absurdity, and it pays so much homage to all those schlocky 70s exploitation horror films that it's a really good film. Devil's Rejects is him trying to take himself seriously, and as a result, he just creates a piece of garbage that is inhuman. He wants me to feel sympathy for a bunch of serial killers, which I will not feel because they're fucking serial killers. And he just pisses away all the good faith he did with that first movie, right? Or at least in my opinion. Yours may differ. Now, if you're into that kind of stuff and you see something in that, more power to you. I have a friend of mine who lives in Regina, the town that rhymes with fun, and he is a super fan of all of these types of things, and he really, 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 really appreciates them on a level that I can't appreciate them on because I can't get past seeing them for what I feel they are, which is a bag of chips.
Now, talking about like remakes and sequels and stuff like that, and going back to the well for the same thing, what do you think about American or Western audiences in general needing to remake horror films from overseas? Things like Ringu or some of the other ones. There were some great horror films that came out of Japan, some amazing ones that came out of Korea, and they get remade over here with American actors and Western actors. Things like The Ring, The Grudge. Yes. What do you guys think of that? Is that necessary to remake them? Can we not identify with a foreign audience? Or it's just that we want our own and they had a good idea, so we're going to steal it?
I'd say that they probably just want to rip the story. If it's that good of a story, we should be able to just use it with our actors. I do think there's a little bit of a culture gap when it comes to horror, but not if it's really, really good horror. It shouldn't matter who's watching it in any across any ethnicity. It shouldn't matter. Like Jaws, anybody can watch Jaws. If they're near water, they're gonna freak out.
Yeah, fair point.
But things like
I don't think we need them.
Oh, go ahead. You don't think we need the remakes?
I don't think we need them. I think the best example of a Japanese style horror film made by Americans was that one that came out last year about the sexually transmitted disease. What the hell is it called? The one where the girl sleeps with the guy, and then now there's a thing coming at them. It follows. Is that it? It follows. Is that?
Yeah, oh my god, that was creepy.
Follows. Okay. Yep, that was a good movie.
And that was a very well done movie. Now, at the end of the film, I was bored by the end of the film because I got what they were saying right away, and I'm like, okay, can we go now? But they were making something that was not a traditional American horror film, and what happened? American fans reacted strongly to it, and they made it a big hit of a film. Whereas The Grudge is never going to be the American one with Sarah Michelle Gellar is never going to be received on that level. The other thing is there was another one that I was trying to remember. It was It Follows, and then there was another one recently that had the same sort of effect. Oh, sorry. God, I'm a moron. The original Blair Witch. The original Blair Witch was them doing a film that was nothing like an American horror film and was probably influenced by seeing stuff from other countries to a certain degree, and it really responded well. Then you take a Spanish zombie film called Rec, R-E-C, record, right, on a video camera, and it's probably one of the best foreign zombie films I've ever seen, and then they do an American version of it, and it was just garbage by comparison. I think you lose something in the cultural translation, for sure, especially from the Japanese stuff, because the Japanese horror is so particular. I mean, look at Cabin in the Woods when they show the victory of the little girls in Japan and they're dancing around an evil spirit and then suddenly it's a frog in a cup. Your average person sitting in the middle of the Midwest is going to look at that and go, what the fuck? Why is what? Whereas for the Japanese culture, that might mean more. It might have more meaning because a frog might have a spiritual fucking hengeoke connection or something. Who knows? So I'm a big proponent of make your own films, make your own stories, tell your own culture, because every culture has scary stories. And that goes back to us being, and this is something John Carpenter understood better than anyone else, sitting around a fire with the old man telling us the story about what's in the darkness behind us. And as long as we stay in the fire, we're safe, but watch out for the others because they're out there and they're going to come get us. And that is the touchstone we can all work from with cultural trappings around it. When you, like, what's that that Korean horror film? The one with the monster in the river.
The Host.
Can you imagine them trying to remake that as an American film?
Well, you wouldn't have the intense archery love that you would have. Like,
no, but you'd have M60s and him hitting it with an SUV that does the jump over a canal and anything to make the audience scream "fuck yeah" at the screen. So it would lose a lot of the humanity of that story of a father desperately, who's a giant fuck up, desperately trying to save his daughter that's been taken by some horrible monster that just lives in the fucking canal, right? So for me, I think remakes are a bad idea. I think sequels, if done right, could be a good idea. But overall, there is a metric shit ton of new ideas out there, and Hollywood does not have the capacity to understand that. They want to go with what's safe. They want to go with what makes money, which is why, to touch on something you probably talked about last time, every Marvel movie has the same plot, so much so that even though I enjoyed it, Suicide Squad had the same goddamn plot as a Marvel movie, right down to the blue laser shooting into the goddamn sky. So until we, as audiences, reward creativity and punish tripe, we're just going to get more of the goddamn same. There's two films you all really need to watch. One is called The Kid Stays in the Picture, which is a fantastic documentary about where Hollywood was at the end of the 60s going into the 70s from the point of view of Robert, I can't remember the goddamn guy's name. And then there's another one on blaxploitation films, talking about how the whole Sweetback's Badass song and stuff like that came in, and how those films changed how Hollywood looked at making films to the point where Roger Corman says it best, Jaws is just a Corman film with a budget.
Now, what about... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying, so where are we going now? Where are we going to go from here? Because we're at that same point they were at where Paint Your Wagon wasn't making money. But it cost, that's all the studio knew how to make, was these giant westerns and the musicals and all these types of things. And the audiences weren't going to see them. They were flocking into midnight showings. Well, now we're at the point where audiences aren't going to see Superman versus Batman. Audiences aren't going to see Suicide Squad. Marvel's going to start losing ground soon. They're going to start seeing their diminishing returns is going to start happening. It has to a certain extent with the sequels of all the films. Where are they going to go? What's the next thing? And in horror specifically, which is one of the staples of cinema, going all the way back to Nosferatu, one of the first films shot, for God's sake, and it's a movie about a goddamn vampire, where are we going to go? What's the next thing that's going to carry us forward? Sorry, I'm turning into Jason, who normally does this about comics, and now I'm doing it about film. I'm so sorry.
It happens.
I'm going to shut up and let Dom talk.
So, Dom, what do you do any horror comics at all? Do you read anything?
Not really. I haven't really. I haven't picked up a horror comic in years. I remember back when I was like 10 or 11 years old, reading things like House of Mystery, things like that, Vampirella. But lately, I really haven't seen anything out there that catches my eye.
Yeah, because everybody reads Vampirella for the horror.
Hey, at 10 years old, that was what I was reading for. Oh, and one thing that did pop in my head, I'm not, because a lot of people consider it a sci-fi film, but I consider it more of a horror film, was Alien. The original Alien when it came out. Because I remember we saw that at the drive-in.
Talk about claustrophobic. You know,
Yeah.
a movie about being nowhere near able to be escape the thing that's torturing you.
And then slowly picking off the members of the crew.
Yeah, and they refer to it. They refer to it as a spook house in space, right? Like that's the thing. It's a haunted house in space.
Brian, did you see
remember-
the original Alien?
Oh yeah, of course. You just actually reminded me of The Thing.
Oh, yeah. The remake of John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yep. Where it's just hands down like one of the most awesome films I've ever seen.
And there's a film where the gore served the story because it transferred the inhumanity of this monster they're fighting in the Antarctic to. You needed to see the head grow spider legs and crawl away. You needed to see the chest cavity open up and chop off the guy's hands as he's trying to do the electroshocks and all that kind of stuff. That the gore served the story. In Hostel, the gore doesn't serve the story. Hate to break the news to you.
Well, The Thing worked. Another thing about The Thing that worked was the fact that they were isolated in the Arctic, and you never know who to trust because they cut away. You didn't know who'd been compromised, and it came as a surprise. Especially like when he hopped on him with trying to give him the electroshock with the AED. Nobody expected that. All of a sudden, the guy's chest to pop open.
Not only does
I
chest
love
pop
that
open,
movie.
it grew teeth.
Or
That movie has one of my favorite bits in cinema history, which is when they're all tied up on the thing and they're doing the blood tests, and the guy who plays the commander just says, "Now, gentlemen, I understand tensions are running high and we're all feeling a little crazy, but if you don't mind, I'd like to not spend the rest of fucking winter tied to this couch." And just that slow progression. Boom! I've had fucking enough of this insanity because you, as the audience, were like, "I'm right there with you, brother." Like, fuck. ABC. I believe it's ABC, played that movie one night in the 80s, and they fucking ruined the ending. And you know how they ruined the ending? What is the ending of The Thing? Chalmers and what's his name? Staring at each other. Is one of them the Thing? We don't know. They got their fucking whiskey. They got their flamethrowers. They're sitting staring at each other, and they're both going to freeze to death to find out the answer, right? Credits, end of film, goodbye, we're out. ABC added footage of a husky running across the snow at the end of the movie after that moment to imply, yes, one of them was the Thing. That's like adding the fucking happy scene at the end of Blade Runner. It's just, it undoes what the fucking director was trying to accomplish in a moment that leaves you going, how do I know someone I'm talking to is really someone I'm talking to and not a horrible monster from space that's going to eat my fucking face and take over my identity? So, yeah, The Thing, great fucking film. Awesome fucking film. You should really look into the history of that film, by the way, because Carpenter talks about how hard it was to get that film made and how badly the studio treated him after it came out and wasn't a critical success.
any of you guys ever check out the Dark Horse comic that followed up where The Thing left off?
No. When was this?
No.
Early 90s. I don't want to spoil it for you until let you go see if you can find copies of it.
Right on.
But it's actually, that's one thing Dark Horse does that I really like, is take movies, especially like action films, things like The Thing, Terminator, Aliens, even Starship Troopers, and build on them. They really do good comic adaptations. RoboCop.
Aliens versus Predator, their first Aliens versus Predator comic where they're on that planet harvesting the cattle and everything.
Awesome.
But how that wasn't the fucking movie, I will never know.
I've been so disappointed with Aliens versus Predator movies. I'm like, they took two really cool concepts, merged them together. The comic was great, which it should, like you said, it should have been the movie. and instead I'm not sure what we've been getting. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, I liked the first AVP. The first one I liked, and I know it wasn't great, and I know it wasn't awesome, but I liked it because at the end of the day, I went in to see a movie called Aliens versus Predators. I saw aliens, I saw predators. They fought each other in some cool fucking bits. I'm done. I'm happy. Right? I don't need anything more than that. But that's because I've lost all fucking faith in Hollywood. So I don't go in expecting miracles anymore, and that's why when I see them, I'm far more happy about it.
Is that why we have so many people chasing for foreign horror films? Because the Western audiences have kind of lost touch with what really scares people?
Brian, you're a horror film director. What do you think?
I'm going to have to agree. All the movies that I've been trying to follow up on have been foreign lately. I've been trying to grab this Turkish film, Baskin. I can't find it in English. Let me put it that way. I can only find it in German. And there's another one.
Whoa, I just found this film. Okay, hang on, guys. You have to listen to this description of a film before he goes any further. A squad of unsuspecting cops goes through a trapdoor to hell where they stumble upon a black mass in an abandoned building. I'm in. All right, I'll watch this film. On that principle alone, I'm like, I want to see how this plays out. That sounds like a Dario Argento film, actually. That's awesome.
I can't find it in English. That's the kicker for that one.
La Porta dell'Inferno. Oh my goodness.
And there's a preview available online, which is the thing that actually hooked me. I'll keep looking. I eventually will find it. I'll let you know.
Please.
Just nothing with subtitles out there?
Not in English. I can find it in Turkish with German subtitles, but not straight English.
That's because the Turks and the Germans have been go back so long it's not even funny.
Let's not bring up World War
War. A
One.
lot of Turks living in Germany.
Come on now. Let's not bring World War One into this.
I don't know. Even when I was in Germany, there's a lot of Turks running around there. A lot.
Turkish. I can find it. Yeah, I can find it in Turkish, but not with English subtitles. Damn it.
Correct. Yep.
There's Brian going and getting everybody their gateway drug.
Yep.
So what do we do from here if we want to advance the horror genre in all its different forms? Do we still just go forward and attack the human condition, or do we find a way to blend things so that it's so that we have a little bit of the fantastic mixed with a little bit of the human condition? I mean, what do we do next in horror?
Well, okay, the best horror in the world is always going to be representative of some social anxiety, right? That's always going to be your best horror. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Red Menace. Halloween, Black Friday, Black Christmas, Halloween, Friday the 13th, Stranger Gonna Kill You, right? Because in the 70s, we were starting to see increased crime rates shooting up all over the world, hearing about satanic cults living in the fucking Midwest and in suburbia. So that's what came out of it, right? Well, zombie films, fear of losing identity by being overtaken by the Red Chinese or the Soviets or commercialism or whatever they've mutated that fucking tired horse into today. So what scares us today, right? What scares us today? The scariest thing that happened to us, that the scariest thing that we're living through today, other than actual terrorism, is what? Is
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton?
Exactly. And that movie was already made. And it was done by fucking John Carpenter. It was called They Live. And it wasn't scary. It was prophetic. So what scares people today? That's the question you need to ask yourself, right? And I think what's happening is, and I see it certainly in Canada, I don't know if it's the same in the States, immigration into North America from so many diverse places of the world now has changed the cultural touchstone of our society. Case in point, in Quebec right now, in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot more Latin American immigration than we ever saw before. Like, you guys in the States are more used to the Latin American immigration because of Mexico and Cuba and what have you. But we're seeing it now in Canada, and it's bringing a whole other thing, concepts like Santeria and what have you, into the Canadian zeitgeist, into the Canadian consciousness. That doesn't scare us. As a culture, as Canadians, we're not afraid of these things, so we're not going to make horror films about that, right? right? And that leaves us with only one horrible story to tell, which is fear of immigration. And that's not a horror film I want to see unless someone can do it really, really well. But then again, I think you need to tell that story from the immigrant's point of view. You need to tell the story of people moving to a place and uncovering some horror, Stepford style or Last House on the Left style, or whatever the case may be, within the culture they come to. Because as a culture, we're not afraid of anything anymore. We're afraid of ourselves, maybe. We're afraid of the failure of our grand ideas, but we're not afraid of the boogeyman anymore. The boogeyman's gone. He lived in a cave in Tora Bora, and we sent bunker busters in there. The boogeyman is gone. We have no more boogeyman in our collective zeitgeist anymore. The virus films are done. The zombie films are done. Vampire films come up every now and then again, but they fail. They're not doing what they did. They'll never do the box office they did before. So what's left to be afraid of? I don't know. Me, I got nothing. Dom, Brian, you guys got anything?
Aliens.
Aliens. Skyline. Remember they did that with Skyline or whatever it was called? And it failed miserably because it's not scary.
Have you seen the movie Altered?
No, who's in that?
No, it's another B-rate.
Okay. Is it a Netflixer?
It was on Netflix, but they removed it since. You know, it's kind of like another indie type film.
Did the aliens order it removed?
No. Altered is a cool movie. For me, like The Thing, and there's really not another movie like that I could really kind of associate with it. But the thought of aliens coming down to the planet and like eating my brain, or abducting masses of people, because it's an unknown, it can never be proven or unproven. We have to tap into the fear of the general public of the unknown. We shouldn't be remaking anything that we've already made once, because why tell the story again with new actors?
Just go watch the original, man.
I agree completely with that. No more remakes. I do agree that some of the remakes they've made have actually been really good, like the remake of The Thing or the Evil Dead remake, but going over the same ground all over again, it doesn't work.
So let me see if I got this right. This is Altered 2006 from Italy. A group of men changed by a strange occurrence. Now the same group of men will spend a night together in terror.
Correct.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right. I'll check this one out.
How about it, Dom?
Hey, well, here's a fun one.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Dom. Go ahead, Dom.
I'm trying to think. Looking at some of the movies that are going to be coming out this year. So far, we've got movies. We've got The Conjuring 2, Don't Breathe, and The Boy, which I've seen trailers for all of, and apparently a remake, another installment in Blair Witch.
But is that all we're good for now? What do you think, Dom? Is that all we're good now? Is remakes? We can't take horror
anything that
further?
makes money. They're going to ride it till they milk every penny out of it they can get. Like Blair Witch made money, and then they just kept milking that cow and milking that cow and milking that cow. The Conjuring, and apparently, I guess The Conjuring, when it came out, was like one of the biggest horror money makers they'd come out of Hollywood in a while. And in my opinion, the only part I liked about The Conjuring was the first few minutes with the little doll. That was like the best part of the movie. After that, it was just kind of, I got up, went and got a sandwich. And check my email.
There's the horror film you need. You need the horror film about the guy who's so fucking bored that all this horror shit's going on around him, but all he wants to do is get a fucking sandwich and check his fucking email. And like the world is going to hell around him, and he's just bored because he's seen it all before. And
have you seen Evil Ed?
Nope.
Yep. That's another one to check out. It's a story about this guy. He's a horror movie editor.
Uh-huh.
So he would actually take the horror movie and clip it out to make it less gory. Eventually he goes crazy. And
so this is a Swedish film. I'm looking at it right now. Anders Jacobsen directed it with Jan Rudbeck and Per Lofberg. Sorry to anyone from Sweden who's listening. And Olaf Rodin. Okay. I'll check this one out. This sounds like 1995. This looks like something I would have seen on a Blockbuster shelf or something.
Yep. VHS.
But there you go, right? And that's the thing. Look at the films you're recommending. They're not American films, buddy. You're even
Yeah.
more by American horror films at this point.
Now,
Yep, yep, yep.
what about talking about the social consciousness? Oh, go ahead, Dom.
Remember, they did a remake of it. The original film was called "Let Me In," and I think the American remake was "Let the Right One In."
Let the Right One In.
Vampire
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, see that I watched because I watched the American version, then I went back and watched the original. And they were like huge. I was like, the original was so much better, so much better.
So much better. In fact, it's so much better that when you get to the European films that try and do the American style, like Dead Snow, they almost come off like comedies. You know what I mean? They like even with whatever European sensibility they're going to throw into it, it doesn't play like a really good film. It plays like them making fun of American gore and American horror films, right? So your point is great. What makes money will get produced, and I agree. I've worked in the film industry most of my adult life. What makes money gets made, and it's as simple as that.
Now, one thing we haven't touched on in all horror films, the soundtrack. Without a decent soundtrack that sets the mood, sets that scene up, I don't care what's going on in the scene, it's not going to have the same effect. Because you've got to have a good soundtrack in a horror film.
People 40 years later who have never seen the movie Jaws, if you start humming that or thumbing that soundtrack, they still sit there and be like,
moment.
Yep, they'll still sit there and be like, dude, we're not even near the water. They don't even know what movie it's from, and they already associate it with sharks.
Or what I call the Michael Myers theme music.
Yeah, kill, ha, 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 Jason, right? That's another thing. The Friday the 13th audio cue for when Jason's going to show up. You're right. That's the thing. Sound is such an important part of this whole goddamn thing. And I think what's happened today is that we have lost sight of how important sound and music are in films, that when we see them done well, we don't notice because it's done well and it just becomes a part of the entire event for us and we don't pick it out. We only notice it when it's done poorly and therefore shit on it and think it's unimportant, right?
Well, one thing about like John Carpenter did a lot of his own soundtracks. He did composed his own music and laid it over the film, so it worked.
He did that to save money, by the way, because he couldn't afford to hire composers.
But the thing is, it worked in his movies.
Okay, you want to know one of my favorite films that is a horror film that is one of my all-time favorite films is? Prince of Darkness, John Carpenter.
Oh, that was
what
creepy.
An amazing concept, man. It's such a creepy film. A bunch of fucking students are brought together to go study this weird thing found in the bottom of a church in the middle of LA. And welcome to the fucking apocalypse. Like, it's just such a good film. And yeah, it's got a little bit of gore in it, absolutely. And it's got a few jump scares and what have you. But that fucking ending just leaves you going, we're all fucked. We're done.
The ending of that I saw it in the theater. Everybody in the theater jumped at the ending.
Oh,
Everybody.
For sure. But that's John Carpenter, right? That's a master.
What was the name of that?
Darkness.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to check that out.
Listen,
I love
I haven't.
Carpenter.
If you're going to be,
check it out.
if you're going to be an amateur, if you're going to be a filmmaker and you're going to make low budget films, you need to watch everything John Carpenter ever made. That's your fucking 101 class. Then you need to watch everything Wes Craven made because that's your 102 or whatever the next up level 201 class on setting like the fucking psychological mood is. And then after that, you pick and choose what you like, right? Go grab yourself some fucking Hitchcock so you can learn how to do proper camera angles. Go grab yourself some Friedkin so you can learn what lighting is supposed to look like and things like that. And then as you slowly watch these people and learn from them, you can make amazing films. The problem is and I just did an audition for an Eli Roth film. It's that a lot of these modern directors, they're just so one note, or they came from the Tarantino school of filmmaking, which is that they loved only bad films and failed to learn from the good films. Good films exist for a reason, in horror, in sci-fi, in war, in everything. And what we can learn from them as filmmakers is amazing. Now, who's seen 13th Warrior?
Oh, yeah. Good film.
Okay, good film. Not a lot of people agree with you. A lot of people think it's not a good film. A lot of people think it's a bad film.
13
But
it's a pretty good film, and I picked it up at the bargain bin, and I was like, this was actually a decent movie.
But did you see? There's something. Brian, I want to test you on this one for a second because it's kind of a horror film. Because the story it's talking about is them dealing with an outside thing and trying to, is it a dragon? Is it animal man? What is this horror that we're fighting against? Really, at the end of the day, What's the most important thing McTiernan did in that film? Natural lighting. He refused to use giant lighting rigs and light up the night with fucking 40K bulbs and what have you. He used fire, sun, reflected light off of water, everything he could to give it a natural lighting. So while you're watching that fucking film, what you don't understand as you're watching it is that he has put you physically at the campfire. He has put you physically at the barriers while the thing's burning, because you're getting the exact same light the people going through the experience would have been. Therefore, he's removed that safety net of I'm sitting in a theater, and emotionally, or at least visually, put you in that place. That's something we need to learn about, right? Sound, need to learn that. I wish I could think of an amazing example of a sound film, but I really can't right now, and I feel kind of fucking dopey about that. But I'm just saying that there's so much to learn, and it all begins with John Carpenter, man. You got to start with Carpenter and go from him, because he is, hands down, like him, hate him, enjoy him, don't like, he is a master of his craft. He really knows what he's doing when he gets on a film set. He really knows what he's doing with a camera. And in horror, I'd say he's one of the holy top trinity of guys. You know, him, Wes Craven, and George Romero would probably be the real, the grandfathers of modern horror for me. Oh, I got a text.
So as we're winding down, let's start with Dom. Favorite horror film, and if you could take that horror film today, what would you do to change it?
My personal favorite horror film still has to be the director's cut of The Exorcist. And what would I do to change it?
Like, what would you do to make it applicable to today?
Not a lot, really. I mean, it still works. You might have to update the actors playing in it, but other than that, the film itself works. And believe it or not, a close second would actually be Psycho, the original Psycho. That still plays well. And I mean, people, if you've never seen it, I ran into somebody, I showed it to them last month, they'd never seen Psycho. Ever.
Nice. Brian, favorite horror film of all time, and what would you do to make it applicable to today?
Oh, that's tough.
Would it be any of those evil, undead, cabin fever movies that we've talked about so many times?
Sadly, I mean, I guess just for a roundabout all-time favorite, it'd still be Evil Dead. And I really wouldn't change anything about it other than maybe shorten a couple parts or lengthen certain other parts. But I think they did it right the first time.
And do you have a copy of the Necronomicon under your bed?
No, I do not.
Andrew, favorite film, and what would you do to modernize it if you had to?
Well, I've already said that my favorite horror film of all time is The Changeling, so I'll take that one out of the mix. And I would say probably my second favorite horror film of all time would be Pumpkinhead with Lance Henriksen. And what would I do to modernize it? Fucking nothing. I would put it on Blu-ray and make it mandatory for everyone to watch that goddamn film, because Ed Haley, it's such an amazing film. Like, it was a fucking, what the hell is this stupid thing sitting on a VHS shelf in 1989 or whatever at my local video store? Oh, watch this. Hee 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 hee. And at the end, completely involved, completely sucked into an amazing piece of work. They're remaking it, by the way. I found out recently. That makes me really sad because they're going to ruin it.
Oh my god! And other than that, parting thoughts before we call it a show. Anybody last bits? Andrew, last shot for you.
I just want to apologize for dominating the conversation, but I'm an emotional cripple and a shut-in. So for me, any chance to yell at people about film really makes me happy. No, I would honestly say the horror genre is dying right now. It's become far too commercialized. It used to be you could sell, when you use the International Film selling market. And this is Canon Films, by the way, who created the modern one that we live with. It's all based on who your stars are. How many stars do you have in the film? What's their name? Because then they take out their little calculators and they go, well, in Korea, Bruce Willis is worth this much money, and in Japan, he's worth this much money, so we'll give you this much money for the rights to your film. Except horror. Horror has always been the genre where you don't have to have stars, you don't have to have any pedigree, because horror sells everywhere in the world. So if that's the truth, if we exist in a world where horror sells everywhere in the world, and things like Strange Things on Netflix are upping the game to a certain extent, then we as consumers need to up the game and reward the good stuff. And as filmmakers, Brian, I know you're a filmmaker, I work in the film industry, we need to make better films to therefore continue evolving the process. We don't get to sit on our asses, stick our thumb up and say it's all been done before. It hasn't all been done before. We can always come up with some new way. I highly recommend everybody check out the film Krampus that came out last year. It's actually a really good nod to the old Joe Dante Gremlins and that style of film.
Nice. Brian, parting thoughts.
Oh no, I think Andrew pretty much said it all. I have heard other people though say that their favorite movie was Pumpkinhead, so you're not alone in that. And actually, that's what convinced me to buy that movie. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to join you guys on this. Thank you.
Absolutely. And are the glasses the same ones from the movie with Roddy Piper that allows you to see the aliens?
Absolutely not. They walk among us, though.
Dom, parting thoughts.
I just want to be able to go to a theater and see a decent horror film that I'm not bored halfway through. The last few years, I've been pretty much disappointed with everything I've seen. Drag Me to Hell, Conjuring. I want to go to a movie. I want to be entertained. I want to be scared when I sit in a dark theater with a couple of my friends, eating a bag of popcorn and drinking a soda.
Did you see, Dom, Session 9?
Never heard of it.
It's a movie where they're demolishing an insane asylum, and they're basically the demo team that's gone in to tear it all down. And that's all I'm going to tell you. I can't recommend you to watch it because you're going to only be able to watch it in your house, and you can pause it whenever you want, and you can go to the bathroom whenever you want, and you can go get yourself a cup of fucking Coca-Cola whenever you want. But when me and 3 of my friends saw it in the theater, and you're stuck in the theater watching a film and you feel like you can't leave, it was one of the most terrifying, psychological, fucked us up films ever. And everybody who's seen it on VHS or DVD or Blu-ray since has gone, yeah, it's okay, but it's not that scary. And we're like, no. You have to be stuck where you can't leave. You have to keep watching this goddamn film. Awesome film. But you're right. It's the cinema experience. If we're going to watch it in the cinema, make it worth the time my ass is parked in that seat, right?
Well, if I'm watching it at home, I want something that's going to have me peeping over my shoulder during the movie.
Now, have you ever been had one of those movies on and accidentally shot the couch?
Never shot the couch, but I've had something where I had seen like a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, what the hell?
Shadow people. That's the next film, by the way. Brian, you want something fun that's going on right now in the entire ghost, UFO, demon, subculture, late night talk radio, conspiracy theory world. There's a big thing going on with this idea of shadow people, and I think someone just did something on the black-eyed children as well. They're doing something about that. But the shadow people, someone's got to make a good film about that. Brian, get on that. Get on that, man. Do that, Brian. Get on that, Brian.
Black Eye as a child,
It's not a bad idea.
It's the same.
I'm sorry, what?
I said I had a black eye as a child, but I'm not quite sure if it's the same.
No, the Black-Eyed Children is this weird thing where they talk about these strange little kids that are almost like the fucking Children of the Corn meet the Village of the Damned, who show up at your door and they have completely black eyes, and they ask to be let in because they need to call someone or they need help, and then you offer to bring them a phone and they stare at you like they don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and they just keep wanting to try and get into your house. And then basically eventually people close the door and they stand outside staring at them, and then eventually they look out again and they're gone, right? Now what's happening is that the homunculus of the pop culture is bringing the idea of the black-eyed children and the shadow people together and saying that one is a product of the other and what have you. And it's all really weird stuff. Listen to Midnight in the Desert. Listen to Coast to Coast AM. Go on YouTube. If you're a filmmaker, if you're a writer, if you want to make horror comics, you want to make horror movies, there is literally a endless plethora of licensed domain rights free stories just sitting there waiting for you to pick them up and do something with them, because they're all in the public domain, because people are going on TV and talking, they're making YouTube videos. And my personal favorite is when you get into the UFO culture and they talk about the Andromedaeans and the reptilians and the Zeta Reticulations and all this fun stuff, and they write books about it. Well, they claim it's all true. So if you go and take that material and make a film out of it and they try and sue you for intellectual property, well, then they have to openly admit that they made this shit all up, right? So fuck it. Take it. Do something with it. It's there, it's waiting, and it is America's current sort of mythology, zeitgeist horror story. Like Brian was saying, Aliens is the closest thing we have to phantoms and ghosts right now, other than, say, Sasquatch, but Sasquatch is passe.
As my parting shot, I'm gonna call out to actually a DC writer, which is kind of weird for me. Yeah, Andrew, I know. Mr. Snyder wrote a book called Witches, where he takes the trope of the old hag in the woods and turns it up to 11,000. It's
11,000.
It's more a story about a family and a trauma that they've experienced, with the supernatural added in the version of these witches. But the witches that they exhibit aren't like the Halloween tropes that we notice. These are ancient beings that truly feed on misery, and as a result they no longer can identify with the human condition. So what happens when a family who is so broken due to a post-traumatic stressful event suffer another horror on top of that? Which horror has to take precedence, and how do they move past this? So it's a really, really good story, and it's collected in graphic novel form. I bought it for my wife. Yeah, Scott Snyder. I bought it for my wife, and she read it in a night, which normally she doesn't consume comics that fast. So I read it, and it was very well done. So that'll be my pick. And I just want to thank the panel for taking a quick Saturday afternoon to sit around and talk about all this scary shit that we've loved growing up. Andrew, Brian, Dom, thank you so much for coming out. And we're going to call it a cast.